Okay, good morning. If you're joining me here in West Africa, thank you for joining me today on 30 minutes of dyslexia with Blessing Ingyape. I am Blessing Ingyape. And like you know, it's just 30 minutes as usual, so we get straight to what we have for today so that we have enough time to talk about everything I want to talk about. And as usual, I always ensure that I write down every point that I want to talk about so I don't go beyond 30 minutes. So if you're either joining us on YouTube or Facebook, let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. Okay, so while I wait for you to confirm, let me get talking. Um, when I made a post earlier, like a new month post, I intentionally spelled February wrong by inverting my B so that it looked like a D. And what was meant to be just a regular post became um, something that made a lot of people curious, especially parents and educators. And they asked if I could do a 30-minute session on that to help their children, both in school and at home. And like you know, in February so far, we have been looking at homeschooling. Okay, so you can also do this at home to help your child, just in case you realize that they are inverting letters, writing their D like a B and all of that. Okay, so first you need to understand that when children start learning how to recognize their letters, there's always this confusion. Okay, which letter is which? Is D a B? Is P a Q? And all of that. So first you need to understand that it is normal, okay, for children to reverse their letters. So if your child is reversing their letters, it doesn't mean they are dyslexic because most times or always, when people talk to me and I say, oh, I teach children with dyslexia, most people, the first question they always get to ask me is, oh, those kids that invert their letters. Okay, so it's not only kids with dyslexia that reverse their letters, okay? Children growing up, children who start learning how to recognize their letters also reverse. So, how do we know when it becomes a problem? It becomes a problem when at about 7 and 8 years old, they are still reversing their letters. So, a quick check now. If you're watching me this morning and you're concerned about your child's reverse of letters, the first question is how old is your child? If your child is less than 7, then there's nothing to worry about. But if your child is 7 and above, then there is something to worry about. Okay. Um, so what are the common things that children reverse? We have the B, we have the D, we have the P and Q, we have the M and W, the N and U. And if you remember any other one, or if there is any particular one that your child reverses? Let me also know in the comments. Okay. Yeah, some kids also reverse the S. Okay, they reverse the S. But I think the most popular one is the B and D, right? The most popular one is the B and D. So you might be asking, so is reversing letters a sign of dyslexia? I believe I already answered that question, that it is not necessarily a sign for dyslexia. Now, let me explain this. Like I said earlier, kids, when they start learning when they start learning their letters, confusion sets in and they start reversing their letters. Okay. But then when they get to the age of 7 or 8 and they are still reversing their letters, it means that there is a red flag for something. Now, it could be a red flag for dyslexia, or it could be a red flag for visual processing disorder. Now, for dyslexia, it means that there has to be other combinations of signs that you're seeing. If you have attended any of my if you have attended my full intensive dyslexia training, you realize that I always emphasize on this, that when you're looking at signs for dyslexia, there has to be a combination of signs. Now, what that means is that I don't just pick a sign. So, for instance, if I have a child who is reversing letters, I don't say, oh, because you're reversing letters, it means you are dyslexic. Reversing letters can be a sign for dyslexia. But for me to get worried and say, oh, I think my child is dyslexic, it means there are other signs, other red flags, not just the reversing of letters. Okay, it could be your child's inability to follow a rhythm, it could be your child's inability to connect letters to sound. So there's usually a combination of these sounds. Okay, and then if there are no combinations of the signs, if there are no combinations, if there are no combinations of the signs, if there are no, forgive me, when you have children at home, you do a lot of funny things. If there are no combinations of these signs, then it's probably a visual processing disorder. No, thank you. It's usually a visual processing disorder. Okay, but just saying, oh, my child is reversing letters, okay, I'm back. I think I went off for a while, but I'm back. I'm glad I took that break because I had to settle some things too. So, hope we're clear about dyslexia and visual processing disorder. Let me take that again. If it's dyslexia, if it's signs for dyslexia, it will most likely not just be your child reversing letters. There will be other combination of signs, okay? And then if there are no combination of signs and your child is 7 years and above, it is most likely a visual processing disorder. But like we always love to say, do not start labeling the child up until there is a diagnosis. So the first thing, if you notice any of the signs, is to take the child for screening so we can be sure of what the problem is exactly. Like I always love to say, dyslexia is under a very large umbrella of what we call learning difficulties. So sometimes it could be a learning difficulty, but not dyslexia. Like I mentioned, visual processing disorder falls under learning difficulties too. Okay, so do not label, do not say the child is dyslexic, just raise an alarm so that the child can be screened. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Mrs. Inkere. Okay, there's a Facebook user in StreamYard. Won't let me see your name until you give them permission on the link that has been attached to this live video. Okay, so now if your child is reversing letters, what do you do? Okay, like I mentioned earlier, you have checked, you have weighed both sides. So I'm sure right now you can answer the question if it is something you should worry about or it is something you shouldn't worry about. Of course, even if it is something you shouldn't worry about, you should also work towards correcting it, okay? But just ensure that you're not putting pressure on the child. But then if you have a child who is 7 years and above, so what are the things you can do? Now, the first thing is you must have flashcards, okay? Learning how to teach your child not to reverse their letters, very important. That is what you must have. It's just like, I think, what's the thing that a lady must have? Now, when you talk about, when you mention a lady, what's that thing that a lady must have in their closet? I'm thinking that, I don't know, high heels, makeup, wig. Well, I don't know, but you should help me in the comment section there. What's that thing that a lady must always have? So if you have a child who is reversing their letters, flashcards is a must have, okay? It's not just by writing it on the board or writing it on the paper. Flashcard is a must have. You must have flashcards. And then also, secondly, what you need to realize that you have to work, take a letter at a time. So sometimes it is not just the B and D that your child is reversing. Okay, it could be P and Q. And feel free to let me know some of the letters your child reverses in the comments there. So it could be P and Q, it could be W and M, it could be U and N, it could be S, but for S, they invert it. So take one letter at a time. So for instance, if you have a child who is reversing B and D, P and Q, you don't do them at the same time. Okay. As a matter of fact, for me, I would take B first. I won't even take B and D. I would first of all take B. Someone say woman must have clothes. Even when we have clothes, we still say we don't have clothes. Like your wardrobe is full, but you're like, what should I wear? I mean, that happens to me a lot most times. Okay, so did you get that? Take one letter at a time, and then also when working on the letters, engage more than one senses, and that's where the multisensory approach comes in. I mean, if you've been listening to me for a while, you hardly hear me talk about teaching children with dyslexia without talking about the multisensory approach. Now, how will that work for you? Now, for someone who is engaging the multisensory approach, it simply means you're engaging more than one of our senses. We have the eyes, we have the ears, we have the mouth, and the feeling, which falls on the visual, audio, tactile, or kinesthetic. So you have to ensure that you're teaching your child using all of these modalities. And what are very practical examples? One of the practical examples is ensuring that the flashcards you have are not just printed flashcards. Okay, I think I have a picture of one here. Let me look for it. You should have something like this. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Where are you? Okay, good. Okay. You should see it. Yes. So you should have something like this. So you can see that this is not just a flashcard. Okay. This is not just a flashcard, but it is rough as well. When the child feels it, it is tactile. There's a feeling. So if you have a child who is struggling with their letters, who keeps reversing them, and if you're going to use any of the letters, make sure you work with this flashcards, not just flashcards that are printed, because this helps you in using the sense of touch or the sense of feeling. And then another one again is that another one for the sense of touch and feeling can be the sand tray. I mean, this is home, so you can, you know, I love it at home the most. These things can also be used in school, but at home you can afford to be messy. You know, in school they might want to be careful not to get the kids dirty or their uniforms dirty, but at home you can afford to, you know, be messy, and I love that. So you can also try the sand tree. Now I'm talking about giving you more examples of multisensory before we get into practical ways of ensuring that your child remembers this. So they can trace on sand. So it doesn't have to be salt alone. They can trace on sand. They can trace on shaving cream. And that's why I said it is totally okay to be messy. Totally okay to be messy. You can try the shaving cream. You can try, what else can you try? I'm sure we have a lot of teachers here who also use a multisensory approach, because I'm sure I have people who have gone through my training here, and then teachers who also teach children here, and you've been using any of these methods. Okay. All right. So we'll talk about the multisensory approach. That's what we're talking about. Now I'm relating that to writing only, mainly feeling, touch, because we're talking about your child writing and inventing letters. But like I said, multisensory, other senses could be the sight, the visual, and the kinesthetic. And most times we combine kinesthetic and tactile together. But for the purpose of writing, tactile does the magic. And then another thing again is writing on their palm. That helps too. Okay, or at their back. It also helps. Now let's talk about practical ways. For me, the first thing is that I'm going to pick a letter. So if my child is inverting letter B and D, for instance, I'm going to first of all start with B. Let's learn how to write B. And that's where all of this option comes in. So you're not only writing on paper. Paper can be boring. I mean, if you're at home as a parent, try as much as possible not to use papers. Kids have enough of books and papers in school already. So when they are home, make use of the resources at home. Like I love to say, throw the pen and the paper away for a while. They're already doing that in school. So ensure that at home is more practical and it's more fun, so that they are not like, oh, the same thing we did in school is the same thing we're doing at home. When you make it more fun, it makes it more engaging for them as well. So first, if I was teaching my child this at home, I'm not going to use a pen. I'm not going to use a paper. I'm basically going to get my sand tray. I'm going to get my rough letters, those ones I showed you earlier. I'm going to get my shaving cream tray and all of that to make it fun. So first of all, we're going to learn how to write that. And while they're learning how to write that, getting strategies for them is also very important. So for instance, you don't just write. I'm sure teachers know this. People know this. Parents know this, but we sometimes take it for granted. Like I always love to say, when I'm training educators, I always say teaching children with dyslexia is easy. Okay. It is basically the things you're doing. But the game changer here is that you have to be consistent, you have to be intentional, and you have to be very patient. Okay. So now we're going to write. And we're just not going to write, but we're going to go straight down and a curve. Now I know most teachers use different things that work for them, so whatever works for you. And you can let me know what works for you in the comment section, okay? For me, a stroke down and a curve works for me for B. So now you've explained that. We move to D now. For me, a D could be a curve, up, down, and a tail. Now this helps it to stick better. Okay, and I know most other people do like a C, go up, come down. So whatever it is that works for you and your child. Now, what I don't know the word for this. What do they call this? Like what I'm doing right now, the stroke down and a curve. I'll find that out later. But if you know the word for it, please put it down for us. So that is very important when you're teaching your child. Have them having that strategy is very important. So don't just teach it silently. And if you've been doing it but not often, ensure you're doing it more often. And that's where being intentional comes in. All right. Okay, so okay, and then other strategies you can use is the hands akimbo. I don't know if you can see me well. The hands akimbo. You can see my hand, the hands akimbo. So if I'm doing this, ensure you're backing me. Yes, because this is my left hand. So first, before you do this, ensure that your child can distinguish between their left hand and their right hand. So my left hand here means I'm writing a D. My right hand here means I'm writing a B. So the same way that appears on the book for them, okay? The same way that appears on the book for them. So depending on which position you're facing me, I might be talking about your right or talking about your left. But of course, wherever you are, you know your right hand and you know your left hand. So I have my left hand and my left hand is for D. So they can just see that, okay, okay. And then my right hand is for B, okay, okay. Did you get that? So that also helps. And one other popular one again that people use is the, okay, bed. Can you see the bed? I have my bed here, and my first hand here is my B, my second hand here is my D. This also helps them to remember. And there are other things too. Okay, I have some pictures here. Let me show you. Let me show you some pictures. Now make it creative. You know, I mentioned earlier that while doing this, try as much as possible to throw the regular pencil and paper away, okay? So what are some of the things that can help? And also remember, practice, practice, practice. Don't think that because you have said like straight down, like a curve, and they've gotten it, or because you've told them that hands akimbo, this is my D and this is my B, they have gotten it. No, you have to keep practicing. Okay, and like I said, if you're don't push the child, just let it be for fun. Okay, so don't get it to that point where the child hates learning. Let it be for fun. But of course, if your child is 7 years old and above and is still inverting letters, that makes the whole learning experience not look like a school. Okay, I have one here. It's a glitter. You know, kids are just so interesting. Kids are just simply interesting. So, for instance, a child might not want to write with a pencil and they are very interested in writing. They just want to write. Very interested in writing. So here is a glitter. Let them have a glitter. Of course, forget the letters on the paper, a letter at a time. If you're working on D, if you're working on B, let them continually learn how to write that using the glitter. You can use a glitter. Why? The glitter makes it fun. What other option do you have at home? Another option that you have at home is this is just a cotton bud dipped in paint. Believe me, this sounds simple, but this will make your child want to learn. And remember, continuous practice, continually writing the letter B the correct way the letter D the correct way. So that's where you juggle their brain. Remember, now that you've taught them how to write and you've taught them how to distinguish, teaching them how to distinguish is very important, because when they miss it, those are the questions you're going to ask. So for instance, if you ask them to write a small letter B for you and they write something wrong, you're going to tell them to use your strategy. So depending on what works for you, hands akimbo or the bed strategy, or the what's the other strategy I spoke about? The, should I call it reading strategy? That one, straight down and the curve, whatever strategy it is that you're using, you have to help them to remember that strategy so that you're not continually helping them write, or you're not continually thinking for them. Them thinking for themselves is very important, because that's what helps them to always remember. So I'll say, okay, Tola, write a small letter B for me. And when I see that they are writing it the wrong way, no, 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 think about your strategy. Hence, Kimbo, which one is your B? And then they'll think about it and they say, oh, okay, this is my B. And then they'll dip their cotton wool in the paint and they'll write. Now, one other thing about using these interesting strategies for writing at home and not the regular pen and paper is that it also serves as a reinforcement. So they are willing to get it so they can write. So for instance, if you don't get your letter B correctly, if you don't get your letter D correctly, if you don't get your S correctly, depending on whatever letter you're working on, you're not going to use a cotton board and the paint. Now, this looks simple, but this is great motivation for them. Okay, what else can you do? Okay, now this is another activity which starts with this. Okay, so first they can write the letter down using, of course, I love to use colored pencils more than the regular pencils. I mean, why must it always be the regular pencils? It just makes learning more exciting. Kids love colors, so explore colors. Okay, so first they write the letter. This is a fun activity. It will help you to stick to the brain. They write the letter. Remember, whatever letter you're working on, it's letter B, it's letter D, whatever letter you're working on. But remember, one letter at a time. Then after that, they pick the glue. Yes. And if it's letter D they're working on, letter P, M, whatever letter it is that they are confused and you want to help them with, they rub the glue around it. Remember that when they're putting on the glue on it, they need to put the glue the way the okay, let me put that back. Okay, while I read your comments. Okay, I love the sandpaper. Yeah, I usually use analogy: a stick with a belly, four letter B, and a stick with a bum bum. I love that. I know, peace. That is very exciting. I don't know, when you just say bum bum, kids just have a way of just laughing and everywhere. So that would really help them remember, especially the bum bum part. They say no, it's letter D that has bum bum and not letter B. Very exciting. I love that. I love that. Okay, so as I round up, let me show you what I was showing you before this went off. Oh god, I love that bonbon part. Okay, so I was saying, where is my picture? Come up, come up, come up. All right. So I was saying that in rubbing the glue, also ensure that they're putting on the glue the way the letter should be formed. And then guess what? After that, you get a yarn. The picture is coming up. Good. You get a yarn, and with that yarn, they'll glue the yarn on the letter they have, on the glue they have written on that letter. Now, you might be wondering, why do I have to go through this process? This fun activity makes them remember. Okay, it makes them remember. It helps sticks to the brain. Then the last thing you would like to try is rainbow writing. The rainbow writing. So they are writing D over and over again. But it's fun. I mean, if you're a teacher here, or even parents who homeschool, you know that thing that we pick a sheet of paper, we draw over 20 lines and make kids write the same letter over and over again should stop. You don't have to do that. Instead of doing that, you can do something like a rainbow writing. So you can have 20 colors. I mean, they won't even know they've written D 20 times because they are picking different colors, writing, picking another color, writing. And remember, practice. And as you are writing it, like a curve, up, down, and a tail. Like a curve, up, down, and a tail. You'll pick green, like a curve, up, down, and a tail. And believe me, from experience, when you do this consistently, remember, consistently, and be intentional. Okay? Things, these are regular things that anyone can do. So, what makes it different and what makes you get the results? One, focusing on one goal at a time. So, don't do all of the letters that your child is struggling with. Pick one at a time. So, if it's B and D, do B and D first. Secondly, practice, 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 practice. Three, make it exciting. And that's why you should do all of these activities. Because apart from it making the whole thing look exciting, it also has a way of just remaining stuck to the brain. Okay. All right. So I hope you learned a lot today. Did you learn something? Thank you so much for being here. Okay. Remember, what makes you see the difference is being consistent. Okay. Being creative, being intentional, one goal at a time. So thank you, Mrs. Yinkari, for joining us. Thank you, Peace, for joining us. And those on YouTube, thank you for joining us. And those who I can see your name right now, I'm going to acknowledge your name when I go off now. Okay, so if you have questions, feel free to drop those questions down in the comments. I will always be back to read them. Honestly, I'll always be back to listen to them. I'll always be back to read them and respond to them. Okay? From me to you. Bye.